and WNST.net. And just because it's opening day this week, don't expect to see this guy around the ballpark. He did that duty, got the T-shirt. He covers all things Ravens these days for The Athletic after a long stint at the Baltimore Sun. He, along with a handful of us who cover the Ravens on a daily basis, along with Luke Jones and Jameis and some others, the folks to follow for all things Ravens. We welcome Jeff Zrebiec back on from The Athletic, joining my compadre Dan Pompei from my Sporting News radio days. Everybody's at The Athletic. I almost put out an April Fool's thing on Monday saying I was joining The Athletic, but I think everyone would have known that was an April Fool's joke. But certainly this offseason has kept all of us on our toes, right? When in the middle of the night, Eric DeCosta's trying to figure things out after losing half the team. They wind up signing a Hall of Famer. I know they're sort of waiting because of the supplemental picks here to do much of anything. But if you're a Raven fan or a beat reporter as you are, it's been a scorecard kind of offseason here, hasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And, I knew they lose people every year. I think we all know that was going to happen. But just the surefire nature of it where, C.J. Mosley decides at 3 o'clock in the morning that he's going to become a New York Jet. Suggs had decided a little bit earlier that he was going to leave for Arizona. I mean, the Ravens thought that Suggs was coming back. There was nobody who was even considering the fact that they could lose Terrell Suggs. So that kind of set the tone. That was pretty shocking to a lot of people. That kind of set the tone. And then, you throw in the Darius Smith, which we all expected, and John Brown, which we probably all expected. And you're looking like, whoa, I mean, this team, his stated goal was kind of rebuild the offense around Lamar Jackson. Now they're going to have to rebuild a whole lot more than the offense. And, Earl Thomas, they weren't even involved in barely to that point. I mean, it's kind of unheard of with a future Hall of Fame free agent and the top safety arguably on the market to sign a guy like that when you basically just started. It wasn't one of those things where they met with his agent and told him we're going to be interested or they were plotting a way to sign Earl Thomas. It was just, okay, we lost all these guys. We have the money. He's sitting up there. Let's see what it's going to take. And within not too many hours, it was done. So it definitely has been an interesting off season, and it's going to get even more interesting, Nestor. There's this close to draft time. I guess we're about three weeks out, a little more than that. They usually don't have this many holes in the roster, so Eric DeCosta and company still have quite a bit of work to do.
Well, I mean, you think about the names, right? I mean, you're talking about the jerseys that have been sold at all the sporting goods stores. Flacco, Suggs, Mosley, Weddle. I mean, this is your brand. I mean, these are who they are, but your brand is also John Harbaugh. Your brand wants to be Lamar Jackson at this point. It's where you want to take the future. And I know you and I had to go in Arizona about Frank Robinson's number being on the wall and what the Orioles are going to sell. The Ravens are trying to find some sort of new identity and a second life under John Harbaugh. And I guess we should start at the top if we're going to do the deep dive here, and we'll get to Bisciotti sort of avoiding us and all that stuff. But Harbaugh being the coach unto itself, and I don't think I've talked to you since that happened, that is a leap of faith for him. And I think the 8 coaches that we saw back in January, Jeff, we were in a room with all of them last week. I'm sort of, if I owned the team, I'd be much happier with Harbaugh than I would with Matt LaFleur or Freddie Kitchens or any of the rest of these guys. And some of those guys might be geniuses. They might be Bill Walsh before it's all over with. But I think Harbaugh, as much as we've all had our differences with him, it's part of having a relationship with John. I think part of being one of his brothers in arms is fighting with him a little bit. He sort of likes that to some degree. There's no argument that he's a hell of a football coach at this point. I mean, just navigating the last 8 weeks of last year sort of put him in some sort of a different category that he went from maybe not being back at all or probably not being back to now, he's going to get a whole nother run here. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing with a team that's had instability in a lot of places right now, as we're pointing out, right?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And I think they're reached a point during the season. Obviously, it was late in the regular season, but they reached a point where you wondered not the opposite. You didn't wonder necessarily if the Ravens were bringing Harbaugh back. You kind of wondered if he was going to be interested in one of these opportunities. You know, teams were jockeying for position.
I talked for days about that, right? I mean, the 2 or 3 days after San Diego, the 2 or 3, and jobs are still out there. The Green Bay job is widely considered the best job in sports, like literally, because there's no boss. And, Harbaugh's agent is connected. I just thought he would want to go back to the Midwest. I'm kind of shocked he stuck around. I mean, it says as much about him as it does Bisciotti at this point, right?
Yeah, and absolutely. And there was a lot of talk about his relationship with Eric DaCosta, John's desire to go through what is certainly a period of transition in the organization. And back then, I think we knew we knew Joe Flacco was gone, but we didn't know that the transition would cut as deep as Suggs, and Weddle was kind of on the fence there. And I think Mosley, we still thought a guy like that they've always re-signed. They've never lost a Pro Bowl defensive player like that in their prime. So all those factors, you wondered if John Harbaugh would feel like it would be a good time to hit the road and try something different. John's not afraid of a challenge, as we all know, and. But I think the Ravens recognize what they have, and I think looking at some of the names that they were hired, it wasn't an overly strong, available head coaching pool. I think some of these guys will turn out to be great hires. I think some of these guys will be on the absolute hot seat around this time next year. That's just how it works. But I think the Ravens are happy that they got the guy they have. John's a proven commodity as a coach. He does a lot of good things. He's not beyond criticism. There are certainly some things that, he should wear it on, and including kind of the instability with the offensive coordinator and not being able to kind of find a stable presence there. But all in all, he's had a highly successful run, and he was the best option, to keep coaching this team, as Steve Bisciotti decided.
Jeff Zrebiec joining us here. He is with The Athletic. You can, of course, subscribe there. You can follow his work out on Twitter. He is around the Ravens as much as we're around the Ravens, and this is a time to be around the Ravens as we're putting together the 22nd pick and the entire board. I got to go backwards, and I don't talk about this with many people, and, I've kicked Bisciotti low here a couple times over the last couple of months. I haven't personally asked him a question or spoken to him in, I don't know, 2.5 years, long time. And I'm about to do Baltimore Positive, as, I made you aware of, and I'm making everybody aware of. And I wonder where the leadership and the accountability on that end is to stand in front of the media for an hour and just talk about things. I mean, and I always hold my PSL up. I got my second bill. My payment due date is April the 10th. I got it up here, and there's my bill. It's $1,444, and I'm not going to re-up my PSLs because I couldn't get my tickets away last year, and I'm a lot less inclined to do that when the owner of the team isn't even speaking. So, that's the fan in me, that's the PSL owner in me, that's the, sort of pissed off journalist, disappointed. I'm not pissed off. I'm disappointed because I think the owner has shown a responsibility and shown an honesty, quite frankly, when he is in front of us that's almost dangerous. I don't know what his reason would be after all these years to say, I'm not going to talk to anybody about anything this year, but that's happening, and it's real, and it's happening at a time when the city's going through a depression, sports locally is going through a depression. I watch the Orioles. I'm depressed. We're about to lose the Preakness, right? I mean, all these things are happening, and he has the biggest brand in the marketplace. I think it's incumbent upon him to be heard from, and not just when he wants to sit with Bunkies or Jane Miller or corporate partners, or they're going to bother me with the Jerry Sandusky. There's annoying calls I get to my cell phone, and I'm going to sit there on my phone and listen to Steve Bisciotti talk to someone he employs to interview him. I'm disappointed, Jeff, and I don't care who knows it, and I think I was around when there wasn't a team. I've been around this goofy baseball owner as you've been around, and you did that for a decade of your life chasing those ghosts. I just thought Steve thought enough to think this is a good idea to talk to the media and the fans, and with the stadium half empty, it would be an even better time to do that, I would think,
Yeah, I was a little surprised, honestly. It's well documented over the years that Steve Bisciotti doesn't enjoy those sessions. He doesn't feel very comfortable. He prefers to stay in the background. But he's so good when he does it, and he looks so relaxed and comfortable. And he always seems to hit the right messages. He always seems to, express accountability, and even on tough seasons, he's managed to, whether it's supporting Harbaugh or sticking to his guns on something, or
how about this, Jeff? Has he ever lied to you? I mean, you know what I mean? Like, I've never felt like he's ever sat on the stage and said anything that wasn't true. And it's one of the reasons I really dig him. It's one of the reasons I fly around and I wear purple and I'm a fan, and it makes me feel good to be, and I'm defensive of the organization to some degree, to say, I've seen it run the other way. I have to just go across the parking lot, and you know that better than anybody. All you need to do is go to the NFL owners' meetings and see who the other owners are. You know what I mean? And then you wonder why he's not there. I have 100 things I could say as to I wonder why. I don't know. I want him to speak, and I think there is an authenticity and an honesty about him that is refreshing when he speaks. I mean, he shows his brand well, and when he doesn't show up, it makes me scratch my head and wonder what the hell's going on. You know what I mean? It makes me think, what's really happening here? Because it is unlike him that he wants guys like you and me saying, "What are you doing, Steve? What are you running from?" He doesn't seem like a guy that wants to hear that either.
No, I totally agree with you. And, what has it been, 13 months, 14 months now since he last spoke? And, I think if they had a disaster of a year, they made a head coaching change, I think fans would be demanding that he speaks more because there would be an organization in turmoil. But this was kind of an opportunity to kind of push things forward a little bit. I mean, people, there's more fans in the seats late in the season as they went for this playoff spot. People seem to be excited by Lamar Jackson, defense #1 in the league, huge draft. You're right. I think we'll hear from him at some point, but it won't be what we want, what we prefer. It'll be on one of those, conference calls with season ticket holders where we're not, we're permitted to listen but not ask questions. And I always like to hear from him. I think it's important. I think at the owners' meetings last week, he was probably one of 5 or 6 owners that didn't speak to the press or didn't speak to one of their local reporters. And, we would have all loved to hear from him. You're right. He's always answered honestly. I've never had any indication that he's lied to a question. He's pretty honest. Sometimes I'm sure he may be miffed that it gets thrown back in his face, like the whole Harbaugh comment last year when he said basically that, I considered moving out from John, and that kind of was thrown back in his face all year. But, I mean, that's part of it. That's part of doing the business. And he's been very good at those sessions. And, disappointing is the word I would use as well.
He is Jeff Zrebiec. He covers all things Ravens and does it as well as anyone out at The Athletic. You can subscribe there. You can also find him out on Twitter and anywhere Purple coverage is. The question I would ask him, what's your exit strategy, Steve? You've been around a while. Who's going to own the team 10 years from now? What's the grand plan here, as we get into this thing? I mean, we're 22 years in now, right? I mean, 24 years in now. He's 19 years in, 20 years in, and I don't think it's as fun for him, right? And I think the fans may say the same thing, that it's not as fun as it used to be. The league, the rules, the team isn't as good. Ray Lewis isn't dancing anymore. Now Suggs is gone. No one really knows much about Earl Thomas. I know him to be a Hall of Famer, and I see him to be sort of pissed off for greatness. The fans are going through a transition here too. And I think the whole thing needs to be reset to some degree. And I think it's incumbent upon them to be more aggressive than they've ever been in a lot of ways to win back the attention of the people here, because the baseball team's not going to do that. This is an incredible opportunity for them the next 3 or 4 years, I think, and for Lamar Jackson as well.
I do. I agree with you. And we all know what's going on with the Orioles. And it's not going to be good. And it's not just not going to be good for the season. It's going to be several years before it's, they hope it's good again. You use the word opportunity. I think that's the best way to put it. As I said, I thought this was an opportunity to get out and talk excitedly about what you have in Lamar Jackson. This was not a team. I think people, because they made the playoffs last year, and I'm not saying Baltimoreans necessarily, but some Baltimoreans. I think there's a kind of a confusion of where this team is. I mean, this team has to retool its entire offense around a quarterback who's still learning about throwing the ball. I mean, Lamar Jackson's not a sure thing. I mean, there's going to be some uncertainty there. Now they have to replace them, 5 or 6 stars on defense, some of your biggest leaders. This is a team firmly in transition, and this would have been a good time to preach excitement and going forward with Lamar at the helm and the new face of the team. So, again, it kind of all sets up towards this draft, Nestor. It'll be fascinating to see what they do, because you could tell me right now 5 different positions they could select in the first round, and I wouldn't argue with you. Now, last year, I think anybody who ever heard anybody talk or watched the Ravens knew they were going to get a target for Joe Flacco. We didn't know if it was a wide receiver or tight end, like it wound up being a tight end, but we knew it was going to be a target. We knew they were going to go on the offensive side of the ball, which they kind of did early and often with, I guess it was the first 4 picks. So we'll see what happens, but there's definitely a lot that this team has to prove going forward, and a lot that they still have to do to think they're going to kind of stay a part of that AFC hierarchy where they're competing for a playoff spot every year.
I'm happy to see Suggs go. I'm sorry to see Weddle go. I think we all like C.J. Mosley and saw him as a good guy, but maybe not a $17.5 million football player. The Flacco thing, and I've bemoaned it. I've written my Dear Joe 10 cents. I thought it was very telling that Lamar Jackson was driving 105 miles an hour like an idiot and putting it on the internet. I mean, I scratch my head and say, what, like that's not a great decision. And decision making's what being a quarterback's all about. And we just bid Flacco adieu and throw him out like yesterday's garbage. I think the organization did as well. I know he did make $148 million around here, so there will be no tears shed. He's out in Denver doing his own thing, and that's a wonderful thing. I'm wondering what happens for him. I mean, we're going to be here to witness all this. Where's your predictiveness on this? I had Ron Jaworski and Sal Palantonio banging on the table when they didn't even know where he was going at the Super Bowl and saying he's going to win a playoff game somewhere. He's going to play playoff football again. He's going to be in the playoffs as a starting quarterback. Now that he's in Denver, I've talked to a lot of people. He smells better out there to some degree. I think people are a little more bullish on him being able to go out there and win football games than they were here. And I think the Ravens are going to be sorry that he's gone at some point. They're going to be very sorry. They're going to miss him. And I think a year ago today, we were sitting here evaluating the draft. Even that night, Jeff, after they picked, the last thing in the world you thought that was going to happen at 11:40 was seeing that pick get tried. I fell asleep. We sent out the text. I literally was laptop in my lap, and I woke up to Lamar Jackson standing next to Goodell, and I freaked out because I sort of fell asleep. I didn't think it was that they were going to do that, and it really does speak to sort of this unpredictability of it all now, right? Like, from that moment forward, if I'm writing Purple Rain 3, boy, that signaled massive change all the way around where it looked like Harbaugh wasn't going to survive, and now we see Suggs, Mosley. We go through the names of all the departed, that move really changed everything in the trajectory for what DeCosta is going to be and for whether Harbaugh's going to have a second life here or it's going to sort of be like Billick where, if they put up a couple 4 and 12s, he's not going to make it 4 years. And they would only put up 4 and 12s if Lamar can't do this or he gets hurt or they don't have a plan B, because so much of this is into a guy that every team in the league didn't want last year, And I didn't have anybody pounding on the table about Lamar Jackson. Everybody's coming over to our table last week, Jeff, as you saw, asking about Baker Mayfield. There's no buzz on Lamar Jackson being the next great quarterback. Except here. They really believe in him. They've bet their lives on him, really, And I don't know that I would do that, and I wouldn't do that because 31 other general managers didn't do it.
Yeah, I mean, look, everything we talk about in terms of their roster upgrades and what they're doing going forward, and, I think it's pretty clear this offseason that they're operating, and Eric DeCosta was clear about this, that they're just not concerned about this coming year. They're concerned about keeping salaries down and not putting themselves in cap purgatory going forward. They're concerned about getting another third-round comp pick. They're concerned about,
Well, that's an indictment of themselves a little bit, right? That they've never had that offseason with money. But to their point, hey, when you draft Haloti Ngata and you draft Joe Flacco and you draft Marshall Yonda, and you draft Terrell Suggs, 17, you keep those guys around. So they've never had cap money, but they've never really wasted a lot of money either, right? I mean, they haven't had the Chris Davis thing hanging over them much, right?
Yeah, you sign your own players and you draft well. you're going to have people on the salary cap making a lot of money. I mean, that's just how it works. I mean, good players cost a lot of money, and for the most part, I mean, some of their decisions you could probably question. I mean, Brandon Williams is going to be a decision that gets questioned for a while. Not all their extensions works out, but that happens. That happens everywhere. They've still been pretty good about knowing when to move on from a player than not. But yeah, none of this stuff is going to matter if Lamar Jackson doesn't stay healthy and doesn't improve drastically. And it sounds like the kid's working hard. I mean, I'm not big on people constantly putting up these Instagram videos and saying, "Look, my quarterback is working." Some of the hardest workers in the world, you never know even what they're doing because they're just working constantly. They don't feel the need to broadcast it. Now, I'm not saying Lamar Jackson is doing all the broadcasting, but certainly people are talking about it. He needs to be a different quarterback for this to be successful, or a couple of years they're really going to be in trouble. I mean, I think we all know that. It's going to all depend on him, which is why they're kind of designing their offense from scratch this offseason. They're doing every bit of it, not just the verbiage, everything. They're completely starting over on offense, and he's getting the keys to the offense. This is not going to be an offense he inherits in the middle of the season when Flacco gets hurt, and they kind of start transitioning it on the fly. This is going to be an entirely new offense, and we're going to see how it works. It's basically the near future of the organization depends on it.
Dude, I want you to, you and I ran into each other Saturday down at Torrey Smith's thing, and, you're selective in what you cover. You work for The Athletic. It's sort of a new breed and a different thing. You have kind of a different kind of gig than you had at The Sun, and you sort of get to pick and choose what's important to you, and, and I think that's awesome, and I think social media and where the new media is going, that is what it's about. It's what you're passionate about and where you are. I saw you at Torrey Smith, and I know he complained about the business community. I would do the same thing and say, where are the businesses? That's what Baltimore Positive is all about, as I pointed out to you. But to see a player like that and come back here 3 teams later and bringing in Cam Newton and bringing in Tyrod Taylor, and somehow Lamar wasn't there and there weren't a whole lot of current players there, That was a little disconcerting to me. The whole part of it, that there's a guy who's a great guy, we all know is a great guy. I'd like to see more support for stuff like that, and clearly he spoke about that. And, and I go back to Pam Shriver doing tennis events in the city, and myself doing Nice Guy Awards for a decade, that there is a shelf life on a golf tournament or a charity event, but you do want to see it growing, and I feel bad that Torrey's put so much into it, and we haven't seen the thing really grow into like a tree that we want it to be. And I know you've put some elbow grease. We all have put some elbow grease, because when we see a player who's genuine, who wants to do something like that, we've seen the phonies. We've seen the mercenaries rolled, the Crabtrees and the Macklins, and nothing to them, but they're not vested here. Torrey isn't here anymore and is still vested, and I think that we should celebrate that, and guys like you need to get a megaphone for that,
Yeah, I completely agree, and I wrote some, where my current, I'm not going to, they wouldn't really want a story. Not that they don't want a story on people doing good things, but they'd want a little bigger picture story, not necessarily on an event. And Torrey Smith had recently, in Carolina, he won the Athletic Carolina Athlete of the Year for his contributions in there. So
wow.
A big picture Torrey Smith story, I'll probably do at some point again, but it wasn't really the time for it. But I went to support Torrey Smith, and also to see how many teammates were there. And if there's, I don't deserve an award, and I also, you always are looking out for yourself and want to know if there's anybody that you can talk to that'll make for a good story. Does Flacco show up? Does Lamar come? Who comes? It's always, Bolden's always there every year, so it's kind of like a cool little mini Super Bowl reunion of that team. But I just hope people in the city appreciate what he does. I still hear criticism about him as a player. He's probably their best receiver they've ever drafted. They don't win a Super Bowl without him. Yes, he was flawed. Yes, he was more of a deep threat, and had trouble at times with drops. But he was the best receiver they ever drafted. He was a key part of a Super Bowl team. He played big in the season's biggest moments. The Mile High Miracle does not happen if Torrey Smith did not burn a Hall of Fame cornerback champ Bailey twice for 2 touchdowns. And then you put all that aside, and you think about how much this guy is invested in the local schools and local charities, giving out, giving out scholarships to students. And he should be appreciated. He should be applauded, and he should be supported by the city. And he credited the Ravens. He said they still help him a lot with planning and stuff. And but yeah, the more support, the better for him. I think he's delivered. He stood up there and said, look, this will be my home. I will not stop giving to the city even though I'm gone. He's now been gone longer than he was here, and yet he still continues to deliver. And I think that's completely admirable, and I think he's been one of the best athletes to cross Baltimore's path when it comes to being conscious of the community and working with kids and trying to make it a better place. I can't say enough good things about him.
Baltimore positive indeed. He is Jeff Zrebiec. He does a great job of covering the Baltimore Ravens for The Athletic. What do you got in the pipeline, man? What stories you could kick our ass on next couple weeks, man?
Well, I wish there was more news going on. I imagine we'll be in draft mode. I did over the weekend. I caught up with Darnell Savage, Terp safety, starting to get some first-round buzz now, which is interesting. The kids at Maryland have obviously went through a lot this past year, so you didn't hear a ton about them all year, but it's starting to resemble a little the DJ Moore situation, where all of a sudden before the draft, DJ Moore was starting to get some first-round buzz, and there he went, and Darnell Savage is best friends with DJ Moore, so it's an interesting story. I'll be writing him in the next week to 10 days. I'm working on a profile of Eric DeCosta. Eric was extremely generous with his time with me in his office not too long ago. I'm sure the story will be sort of connected and run with the start of the draft because he's always been involved, but it's his decisions now. So Eric will be front and center for the draft. And, I'm sure I'll be on it like the rest of the people. Like, what are they going to do here? As I said, Nestor, they have some tough decisions to make. They don't, there's going to be some tough calls when it comes to what positions they target. They need to hit this draft out of the park because right now there's 4 or 5 spots in the starting roster that are completely unsettled that you have no idea whether they're going to be able to fill. So I think you need to come out of this draft with at least 3 day one starters and kind of roll the dice from there and hope you sign a couple other free agents that can plug in and some of the players that have been here kind of develop and take the next step. So it's an exciting time. I love the draft. I know listeners do, and I'm looking forward to it.
Best player available, they say at the Liars Luncheon, I'm sure. He's Jeff Zrebiec. Follow him out at The Athletic as well as out on Twitter and anywhere the purple birds fly, certainly before the draft here coming up a couple weeks. Great to visit with you, man. We don't do it often enough, but it's always great when we do it, man. Appreciate you.
Enjoy it, Nestor. Thanks a lot for having me.
Jeff Zrebiec from The Athletic joining us here. You can find me out on the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. The morning newspaper ships digitally to your email inbox each and every morning at 7 a.m. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and planetfitness.com. Always $5 down, $10 a month. Get some inspiration. You can watch my wife out on Facebook get inspired. She's running right now, but you can get that out as well at planetoftriumphs.com. Last but never least, always brought to you as well by the Maryland Jockey Club and Laurel, and they're racing, of course, the Preakness Stakes next month at Old Hilltop here. We'll be talking all things racing and the future of the race here as well. The morning newspaper has the entries each and every day as well as the front of WNST.net. If there's any breaking news, weird stuff, trades at 11:45 for quarterbacks on the 32nd pick of the draft, you get it first on the WNST Tech Service. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And, of course, Dennis is here every Thursday from 3 until 5 doing the SSV on WNST. That's the Sunday Sports Voice. Appreciate our sponsors and Cole Roofing. I'm wearing my Cole Roofing hat here. And, of course, the Gordian Energy Knot for all your solar needs. We'll have Bill Cole on here later on in the week. And our friends at Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast. That's where I ran into Jeff Zrebiec and Torrey Smith over the weekend down at the Royal Farms Arena. I don't have my coffee cup in here. I don't need to be caffeinated. I'm caffeinated enough. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. I am on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and Snapchat and Instagram and streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.